Wow, a VGSquirrel video. There hasn't been one of those in a while. Sorry. Hey guys, thanks for your patience in waiting for a video of this format to return. I know it's been a while, you know, July. With graduating from college and moving and everything, it's taken a while to get back into the swing of things, but I'm here. I got a new computer, new software, all that, so I'm excited. I'm excited to finally, you know, get rolling on these videos. Since that first video was a top 10 and this is my first actual review, I figured I'd let you guys know that I plan on calling my review series Acorny Review by VGSquirrel. Gotta keep sticking with that squirrel theme. And man, that is a terrible pun. Thanks, Devin. I can't put this on Devin, this was all on me. Anyway, enough of all that nonsense, let's get to the video.
'Cause it's VGSquirrel!
Duh! Let's think back to E3 2014. The hype for Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS was at an all-time high. Nintendo fans waited in bated breath to see which characters would be added to the game. In Nintendo's presentation, we were introduced to the Mii Fighters, as well as Amiibo. Later on, we were introduced to Palutena. While they were cool additions, it didn't seem like the sort of huge announcement that usually comes from E3. But later on in the event, it was revealed that one of the most iconic video game characters of all time, Pac-Man, would join the battle. Some were super excited by the announcement, others did not want Pac-Man anywhere near the game. I, for one, didn't lean either way, until I saw the trailer. I didn't know how they would make Pac-Man work within the game, but once I saw his moveset, I was instantly excited to play as him. The man can summon fire hydrants. It was so strange to see at the time. Anyway, despite everyone's attitude, there was one thing that everyone agreed on. What the hell was that stage Pac-Man was on for the Wii U version? It looks like a drawing done by a second grader for an assignment where they're asked to draw their neighborhood. They kinda got carried away. Well, it turns out that stage is from a game called Pac-Land. While I'm sure some people that saw the trailer knew what game it was from, you still have to admit that it was an odd choice for a Pac-Man stage. Usually when people think of Pac-Man, they think of the infamous Pac-Maze from the original game. Thankfully, we got that stage in the 3DS version of Smash Bros. I, for one, had heard of Pac-Land, but had never actually played it myself. However, a couple of years later, I have picked up a TurboGrafx-16 and a couple of games for the system, one of them being Pac-Land. So I thought today we'd take a look at the game that created one of the oddest Smash Bros. Stages, but also helped Pac-Man become the unique fighter that he is within the game. Before we get into the game though, I want to take a moment to give some brief information on the TurboGrafx-16. If you're about my age and aren't super into video games, you may not even know exactly what the TurboGrafx-16 is. It was released in Japan as the PC Engine in 1987, and was later released in 1989 in the United States. It started out as a competitor to the NES, but eventually found itself competing against the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Unfortunately, it didn't stand a chance against those two juggernauts in the United States. However, I hear it did perform well in Japan. I have some personal gripes with the console. Unfortunately, due to its obscurity, finding other games for it is kind of a hassle. Another big issue is the video cable. I got my TurboGrafx off of eBay and it came with third-party cables. However, the TurboGrafx came with an RF cable, which gives an absolutely terrible signal. So, I went online to look for a composite cable for the system. Apparently, they did officially release one of them in the form of the Turbo Booster. Unfortunately, it must not have been very common, and I am not willing to pay those kind of prices for a cable. So, I bought a homemade cable that was around $30, which is still too much for a cable to me, but hey, I wanted to be able to play my system. Finally, there's the controller. The controller itself is pretty standard, but it does have a nice feature of having built-in turbo switches, which allows you to toggle if you want the action buttons to function as if they were in turbo mode. This was one of the selling points for the TurboGrafx, and I do appreciate the fact that this feature comes in the standard controller. However, what I don't like is the cord. It is way too short. Here it is in comparison to the NES controller. With my room setup, I have had to put this little piece of furniture here, basically due to systems that have way too short of controller cords. And unfortunately, yes, The Turbo-Grafx is one of the main reasons I decided to put this TV stand here. Anyway, enough of all that, let's look at the games. One thing that's really cool about this system are the actual games themselves. Instead of cartridges, they came on these things called hue cards, which allowed for fast loading speed and quite frankly, look really cool. Whenever I've shown my friends one of these, it almost confuses them. I know I was surprised when I first heard about it. However, I know this isn't the first system to do this. For example, the Sega Master System had some games that were on a card-based format, like the hue cards. So the games that I have on the TurboGrafx are Keith Courage, the Pac-Man game, a fun little platformer, Pac-Land, which we'll talk about in a minute, TV Sports Football, World Class Baseball, World Court Tennis, Power Golf, Turrican, and thankfully I do have a decently expensive game for the system, Splatterhouse. Anyway, we're here to talk about Pac-Land, so let's finally get to that. So when you boot up the game, it first says push run button. Oh yeah, the TurboGrafx-16 controller is a little weird in that there's no start button, but actually a run button. I don't really understand why it had to be called that. NEC probably wanted to differentiate their controller. You know, have a run button on the controller, have a tiny cord, you know, cool features. So after the start screen, you pick which trip you want to go on, and then you're on your way. This is another way of saying what round you want to start at. Each trip is 4 rounds long. The first thing you'll notice about the game is actually the strangest part of the game, the control scheme. So, for some reason the people at Namco thought, hey, you know what would be a good idea? You know how a D-pad was made to make movement easy? Yeah, let's completely throw that out of the window and instead use the D-pad to jump. We'll also use the action buttons to run. 2 is left, 1 is right. You may think I said that backwards, but nope. 2 is left, and 1 is right. Well, the reasoning behind this is that on the TurboGrafx controller, 2 is on the left, and 1 is on the right. But you really can't blame them. Nintendo started this. TurboGrafx just wanted to be like Nintendo, as did everyone at the time. Honestly though, the reason behind this whole control scheme is that Pac-Land is actually a port of an arcade game. If you look at an actual Pac-Land arcade machine, you'll see that Pac-Man's run was indeed controlled by buttons. So they were actually trying to stay faithful to the arcade. So for that reason alone, I can forgive them a bit for the control scheme. Do I think I would have liked an option? Yeah, maybe, but to be honest, it only takes like 30 seconds to adjust to this playstyle, so it's really not that big of a deal despite everything I've been saying about it. So the goal of the game is very simple. Basically, run to the right while avoiding all the obstacles. This could be anything from ghosts, to fire hydrants, to water spouts. I love how determined Pac-Man is when he's running through. He's like, nothing's gonna stop me, I've got a place to be! All while rocking a red Robin Hood hat.
Yum.
Huh, okay. I don't know why that's the case, but whatever. So, much like any other Pac-Man game, there are power pellets scattered around. Once you grab one, you now have the ability to eat ghosts. And man, it can be brutal at times. I mean, just look at this. God, this footage. Life can be so cruel. Or should I say afterlife, 'cause, you know, they're ghosts. I love how Pac-Man runs when he has a power pellet though. Now he's not determined, but looks more like a person in a hurry, while listing off everything he has to do that day. Okay, I've got to take Junior to school, pick up the birthday cake, take my car into the shop, and get my wife some flowers. Man, Pac, you're a busy guy. So these ghosts are relentless in this game. Not only are they trying to chase you down, but they are using cars, planes, UFOs, pogo sticks, dangling their kids from balconies, throwing their kids from balconies, and dropping kids from planes.
Look, son, I know you won't understand why I did this, but we have to take this threat down. That's my boy.
Also, isn't that a little lazy of a death animation? I mean, getting hit on the ground I understand, but I mean, falling over, in the air, while your hat falls off and just, you know, you and your hat just kind of float there. Like, you couldn't have come up with a different animation? Anyway, like I mentioned earlier, these trips are broken up into 4 rounds each. At the end of each round, you get a break time. and most of the rounds end at the church, which admittedly looks pretty funny when enemies are around.
Be gone, you sons of Satan!
Let's mention the music. I hope you like this track because it's the one you're gonna hear the majority of the time. However, I think it has a bubble bobble effect, where the song is so catchy that it doesn't really bother you. The only other times that different tracks appear are on the last round of each trip, and on later maps where there's a complete change of aesthetic. The graphics are pretty nice as well. While they may have been a bit dated on the Turbo-Grafx, since this is a port of an arcade game from 1984, it looks pretty impressive for the time. With all the neat animations going on, it kind of feels like you're playing a cartoon, and not a video game. I appreciate that. The artwork is a little basic, and like I said before, almost seems like a child drew it, but that gives the game a unique look. There's not too many games that look like Pac-Land. Sometimes there's some technical questionabilities though. Like here, I'm running through the forest on this path, I jump, and suddenly, I'm behind this tree. I was running on this path on the foreground, and now I'm behind objects in the background. Also, I found out about halfway through editing that the game is actually based on the 80s cartoon. The song that plays is actually the theme song to the cartoon, thus explaining its catchiness.
Pac-Man, that's me!
And since it's based on the cartoon, that explains the cartoony graphics. So, cool. Back to the gameplay though, there are some aspects of this game that take a little while to get used to. This diving board, for example. Every time I jump off of it, I land in the water. And you can't double jump, so how do I get over this lake? Well, it turns out you have to jump off the diving board and tap the 1 button. Or the button that makes you go right, since, you know, I'm going right. It's a bit off though. You would think hitting the jump button on the controller would be the thing to do, but nope, it's the direction button. Once again, it's not a huge deal, it's just odd and it took me a little while to figure it out. So now we're at the end of round 3 and we've arrived at Fairy World, or Fairy Garden, or wherever we are. The nice lady gives us a new kickin' pair of boots, and for the 4th round we run the opposite direction. So you know, left. But first, Pac-Man does this weird, awkward land. Yeah, buddy, you're on the ground. Well, at least we know where this comes from now. But the fun thing is, these new boots give us the ability to jump multiple times. And yes, you use the jump button this time. This is always my favorite round of each trip. Several reasons why. 1, the music changes, so that's a nice change of pace. 2, the new boots are a lot of fun and add a unique new mechanic to the game. But the main reason I enjoy it is because it's almost as if the game is recreating the scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, after Charlie realizes he has the golden ticket and runs straight home to his family. So after your recreation of a scene from a 70s movie, you make it home and are greeted by your child and your wife, Miss Pac-Man. It is Miss Pac-Man, right? Maybe I shouldn't assume things. Now, as you play through Pac-Land, you think to yourself, okay, so I'm Pac-Man, I'm running, and these ghosts are wreaking havoc on the town. But I just went through a good portion of this land, and I'm only seeing 3 Pac people. So I can only assume that, really, this is the ghosts' land, and Pac-Man decided to name it after himself. So, all this time, we think the ghosts are the monsters, but really, it's Pac-Man. He's the monster. Wipe that smile off your face, you narcissistic douche. So later on in the game, you start to find different obstacles and locales. Like, at one point you come across this abandoned water castle with fire hydrants on the 3rd story, where water spouts up and could drag you down into the water like it's a giant squid. You know, because that's what water can do. Grab you and pull you down into it. So according to the manual, this is a bridge. Leap along these bridges, which are sometimes broken and dangerous. Sometimes? Spoiler, I've gone through this game and I have not seen one functioning bridge. Also, seriously? What's with the fire hydrants? Has anyone ever seen a fire hydrant on a bridge? Why was it installed here? I mean, I've heard of burning bridges, but this is ridiculous! Boo! In the style of the original Pac-Man, after every 2 stages we are rewarded with a cutscene. At the end of Trip 2, we are greeted to Pac-Man sitting on his porch, stabbing himself in the eye with an invisible pencil. Why do you do this to yourself, Pac-Man? And why is this bush just watching? Oh no, here we are. My least favorite sections of the game. So, several rounds in, Pac-Land likes to start introducing clouds into the game. While in most other platformers, a little bit of platforming would not be too much of an issue. But in Pac-Land, it's a bit sloppy. In most platformers, you can find time to adjust the position of where you're standing or where you land after a jump in order to make the next jump easier. But in Pac-Land, if you try to adjust, you end up dead. Now, maybe I'm too twitchy with my fingers, and maybe I should be more confident with my decision, but this is almost a natural reaction for me. I also think that with the odd control style, everything is switched from what I'm used to, and that may be a cause of the issue. But yeah, let's just say these cloud sections caused me a lot of deaths. Despite all these challenges though, Pac-Man runs back to his family while helping flowers grow along his path. Aw, Pac-Man's such a good guy, you narcissistic douche. Here we are, round 13, Nightfall.
What in God's name?
Pac-Land really needs to work on this hydrant thing. Why is this a thing? What practical use does Pac-Land get out of putting 2 hydrants on top of each other? Can someone explain this to me, please? Gah! I'm okay. Let's continue. Then suddenly, out of nowhere for round 14, things change. We get to the Monster Mansion section where we have to make it through a maze by using keys to open doors. Also, what? The music has changed. Actually, I might have mentioned that earlier. I was so used to the same pattern, and now you're gonna switch things up? Good on you, Pac-Land. Good on you. 4 trips down, and we cut back to Pac-Man resting. Oh look, he has a peeping Tom looking through the window. That's terrifying. Turns out those mansion sections do pop up later in the game as well. For example, round 19. What I found though is you can make a mistake and use a key at a wrong door. If you do, you're basically stuck until one of these sketchy ghosts come and kill you. Oh, is this your first murder, Clyde? Yeah, with those shifty eyes, I don't believe that for a second. Also, these sections can be kind of a pain. You can't really take the top path at all if there's ghosts on it. Several times I tried jumping over them, and I wasn't able to, like I could on the middle or bottom paths. The final round, round 20, makes for a very relaxing ending to the game. You run back home and almost no ghosts are anywhere to be seen. Truly the best round to recreate a scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So you come home, back to your possible wife and kid, and the game ends. Or should I say, round 21 starts. You would think that's the end of the game, considering when you first boot up the game, you can pick through trips 1 through 5. But I guess those are just starting points. There's actually more to it. This is where Pac-Land starts to get a bit annoying. The thing to remember when playing this game is that it is an arcade game. So the game is purposely designed in order to suck quarters away from players. However, these later levels in the game really start to show that. Once again, the stages that focus more on actual platforming end up not being very fun due to the sloppy controls. Once you start adding in random enemies to the stage, it only gets worse. One thing to note is that whenever you die, you spawn on the last solid surface you were standing on. Or, if you're close enough, on the next closest solid surface. Due to this, the spawning in the game is very fair, but it almost encourages you not to platform expertly to avoid obstacles, and instead just go as far as you can, take the hit, spawn, and then keep going. Since the next time you spawn, there might not be as many enemies on the screen, because they haven't spawned yet. So after round 24, Pac-Man is back to stabbing himself in the eye. And this is originally where I quit playing the game. I assumed that since this was an arcade game, it would basically continue to loop. But, according to the manual, there are 8 total trips, so I figured why not go ahead and finish this thing. Also, while looking in the manual, I found out, hey, there's a more traditional control scheme available for the game. But how do I use it? Well, at the start of the game, you hit select. The lever control is a much better option for playing this game in my opinion. Your hands will naturally be more familiar to this type of playstyle, as in you use the D-pad to move and the 1 button to jump. I started using this control style in a different session of playing, so I have to start at trip 5. This allowed me to get my bearings before leaping into new territory. However, playing through these levels with this new control style made me realize just how slippery and sloppy Pac-Land's controls really are. I'll get to that in a second. Trip 7 is about what you would expect, the same type of running, jumping, and platforming you've come to see, only more difficult. But Trip 8 is when Pac-Land truly likes to flex its muscle. This is where Pac-Land's control scheme is truly exposed for its awfulness. So, you run through the forest and get to the lake, but there's no diving board. So, what are you supposed to do? Well, there's ghosts that fly by in planes, and you're supposed to jump on top of them and ride them. So, what's the best way to approach that? Remember how I said Pac-Man's standing jump is worthless? Yeah, it still is. So you're supposed to get behind the ghost, run after them, jump, and land on top of them. Now, here's a bunch of ghosts clumped together. Watch how far I slide once I jump on top of them. 3 planes? Really? I've seen slip and slides less slippery than this. The spawning of enemies is all jacked up as well. I don't really mind in the sections of the game where you're just running, but when you get to these platform sections, you realize that enemies don't spawn in the same specific section each time. They spawn based on your location on the map, so memorization is almost impossible, unless you basically try every single path. This will become very clear in the final level. So, we have slippery controls in a platforming section where enemies are spawning just to specifically try to screw you. Take a look at this moment, for example. You want to tell me what I was supposed to do there? Because I don't have an answer. The only option was death. Sometimes the clouds don't even seem to work right. You think you know the pattern, but then it's almost as if the cloud just starts to think independently. This cloud doesn't even move. It's like it's out to get me. Also, remember how I mentioned earlier that it's almost better to take the hit? That doesn't apply to this level. The clouds do not count as solid objects, so there are only a few sections of the level where you can spawn. Now, am I against a challenge? No. But do I think things are randomly stacked in the game's favor? Absolutely. It's basically a luck of the draw on if you can make it through the level or not. Thankfully, round 29 is the most difficult level of the game. Round 30 is another Monster Mansion level, and round 31 is another bridge level. Neither are much to write home about. Round 32, the final trip home. Is it a breeze like round 20? No. Is it difficult? Most definitely. Is it as unfair as round 29? Absolutely not. Round 32 is a very unique round of the game. Basically, it's a 2D shooter without the shooting. The entire stage you are above the lake using your magic boots to jump and avoid ghosts piloting planes. Honestly, it's a bit of a strange comparison to make, but it actually works a lot like Flappy Bird. You are flying, trying to avoid obstacles while you move in an arcing motion. Yeah, a lot like Flappy Bird. So yeah, this is Flappy Bird's granddaddy. It was actually the final round where I really learned how enemy placement works in this game. This is the worst aspect of the round, because instead of strict memorization of the location of the enemies in order to avoid them, you have to remember the location of the enemies and where you should be on the map in order to make them spawn in the proper place to avoid them. Also, the scoring on this level is through the roof. If you're for some reason worried that you're not going to make the high scoreboard, just wait until round 32. I put my name in so many times that I started getting tired of doing it. I believe this round actually took me longer than round 29, but I was nowhere near as frustrated. This is due to the fact that there are less factors against me, as the only thing I need to avoid are the ghosts, and also the fact that the jumping controls work a lot better than the platforming controls. Honestly, I think this is a fitting final level. There's enough challenge, but not so much BS where I feel cheated by the game. This is a fine way to cap off Pac-Land. So I leave my way home, meet up with the wife and kid, and have a final cutscene where all the characters wave happily at the screen. Well, most of them. Get your act together, Blinky. This lemon tree or power pellet tree turns into the words, "The End." Not sure why that's the case, but whatever. And I get to put in my high score and end my time with Pac-Land. Okay, real quick. After you beat the game, you get Pac-Land Pro. Basically, a different colored version of the original game. It's less pleasing to look at all the way around, the fairies are dressed up as baseball pros, and the Queen Fairy has black hair now. Woo. The game also appears to be more difficult. For example, here, the codes start dropping their kids quicker than they were before. Somehow. I went through the first trip of this and have no interest in continuing to play through this mode. Thus, my time with Pac-Land comes to an end. So what are my final thoughts on Pac-Land? Well, for the most part, I enjoyed Pac-Land. It's a cool time capsule of a game that kind of shows how platformers were before Super Mario Bros. Except this is actually a port, so this came out after Super Mario Bros., but you get what I mean. I did have fun with the game until about the last 30%, because that's when it starts to get a bit annoying. I think this game works better as a runner type of game, where you try to blitz through the stages as fast as you can while trying to get as high of a score as you can. But once the platforming starts to come in, this game's weaknesses really start to show. Especially the controls. I think it works fine when it's more of a runner type of game, but as you can tell in the video, I started off liking the controls fine, but harping on them more and more as time went on. Mainly due to the platforming sections. However, I do recommend Pac-Land. You can have a fun time with this game, and I'm sure it's fun to master like a lot of arcade games are. But it's just not something I see myself doing. But there's a lot of replay value here, especially with the Pac-Land Pro mode. This is one of the cheaper games for the TurboGrafx-16. I actually got mine for Christmas, but know that it goes for about $15 on eBay. So if you can get it for that price, especially less, I definitely recommend picking it up. Also, stay tuned as the next video should be Pac-Man related as well. It'll be a bit different, but should be out shortly. I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, thanks for sticking around, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm gonna go get my revenge on those clouds. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. While you're here, you can see a playlist of all my videos, check out the latest Game Feeder episode, click on my face to subscribe to my channel, it really helps, or check out this video of Andre over at Black Nerd Comedy reacting to Pac-Man and Smash Bros. That video helped inspire me to make this one. Thanks, guys.